There we go. All right. And once again, thank you all for joining us this morning for this information session on the United Way of Greater Cincinnati's free tax prep program. My name is Matthew Long, and I am a senior program manager here at United Way of Greater Cincinnati. The agenda for today really is to do a few things with the overall objective of introducing everyone on this call to the free tax prep initiative out of United Way of Greater Cincinnati. So in doing this, what we'll be doing is basically doing an overview of the United Way, as well as the free tax prep initiative, a little bit about what we do here at the United Way, as well as what we do specifically with free tax prep. I'll then be introducing a little bit more depth about what it is, where we do free tax prep, i.e. our partners and our locations that are available for individuals to volunteer at. And then as well introduce the different types of roles and volunteer opportunities that actually exist within the free tax prep initiative. In introducing those roles to then talk in more depth about what it is to actually, in terms of our service delivery formats and things like that. There's a number of different ways in which we can deliver free tax prep services to individuals in our community, as well as then, as we work towards the end, provide all of you who are on this call with some definitive next steps, the actions that you can take to continue on this process and this journey of joining up with us and all the teams to deliver free tax prep. And then finally, just ending with any sort of questions and comments at that time. And Sam, I did see your message, and I will work to go ahead and get that chat feature unlocked as well. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and jump right in to the presentation for today. And I would add this as well. With a lot of the things with free tax prep, this is going to be a pretty quick overall session. But there's going to be a lot of next steps, and I will kind of go off script from time to time just so everyone is aware of what it is that we're going to be doing throughout this duration. So, all right. So just for those of you who are unfamiliar, I was going to say, if you're unfamiliar with the United Way of Greater Cincinnati, the United Way of Greater Cincinnati is in fact an organization that believes that all families in our region deserve economic well-being. And so we're always working to build solutions to help people thrive. We work closely with communities to identify patterns, uncover the greatest need, and change systems so fewer people need relief in the future. So kind of coming off script a little bit, what does this look like? So free tax prep is part of a division within the United Way called Community Connections. We do a lot of direct service work with individuals in the community. Most people know some of the work that we do from Community Connections, namely through the means of 211. 211 being our phone line where individuals from all over the region can call to be provided information and access to resources to be able to meet the needs that they have. So for instance, we're getting into that time of year where families are calling for things like winter coats, or even for food baskets or food boxes for Thanksgiving. So 211 is one of those direct services that can help link people to agencies within their own regions or within their own neighborhoods to be able to help deliver those services. However, the Community Connections team does much more than that. There are a number of programs that are part of the Community Connections team, ranging from eviction prevention work through Renew Collaborative, which is a newly launched initiative here at the United Way, the free tax prep work. And generally, Community Connections is all under a larger branch of work that is all part of the Community Impact team, containing a number of other things that we do, including things like the Black Empowerment Works program, which is an equity-focused grant program promoting Black self-determination, social mobility, and economic prosperity. So we are free tax prep is part of one department and part of a much larger division that is doing a lot of work in our community to really do three things. We're aimed at trying to provide services. We're aimed at trying to provide investments in partners to be able to deliver services, as well as then be a key influencer in understanding what it is that our communities need to be able to thrive and to change systems. So free tax prep falls directly in this work. And free tax prep has been one of these things that has been part of the United Way literally for decades now. And we're really trying to work with individuals to be able to help them be able to file their taxes basically at no cost. And you can see down here on this slide, it's really because of volunteers, people like those of you who are on this phone, in this presentation here today, to be able to help deliver these services. Today, besides myself, I'm also joined in the webinar by the Free Tax Prep Associate, Shayla McGill. So really, it is Shayla and I that really help to support a multitude of partners and host sites that deliver these free tax prep services and really get people connected to resources that they need to thrive. So some of you, if you've ever demonstrated interest in the past about free tax prep, you may actually know some of the names or the monikers that free tax prep has gone under for a number of years, because this program, like I said, has been in existence literally for decades, since at least 2005, and kind of appearing in different iterations and names. For many years, we were using websites that referred to the program as Make Work Pay. Sometimes our name of Free Tax Prep is affiliated with the worldwide, United Way Worldwide's platform called My Free Taxes. For many years, it was actually called the Free Tax Prep Collaborative, when it included the Ohio Benefits Bank, as well as other entities that were contributing, but not necessarily part of the direct collaboration or under the direct support of the United Way, as well as the EITC program, which is a reference to a benefit that I'll talk about here shortly. But really what free tax prep really is it's tied to a national program called Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. So volunteer income tax assistance is something that was created way back in the 70s. So this program has been in existence on a national level for, again, decades, for half of a century almost. And what volunteer income tax assistance really did, and does, I should say, because it continues to do so, is really be able to, it's something that came out of the Department of Treasury and IRS to really ensure that low to moderate income taxpayers had access to preparation services through volunteers to ensure that their returns are being completed. And that most importantly, it's not just that the returns are completed, it's that the families who are completing these returns are getting the refunds and the dollars that they deserve. And so again, this program, VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, has been in existence for a long time. And you will see VITA programs across the country. In Columbus, VITA's moniker is under the United Way of Central Ohio called Tax Time. But if you go out to California or Florida, you will find other names and other iterations. But at the core of everything that we do as free tax prep here at United Way of Greater Cincinnati, it's all tied to the federal VITA program. And really, this is such an important program for individuals, because in the beginning, it was a lot about providing tax services to be able to ensure refunds, but even more so nowadays. Think about last year, for all of the taxpayers on this call, as well as this every year since I think the late 90s, is that there has been an increase in the number of benefits for working families and families with children. And really, VITA plays a key role in when we work with these families, that these families are not only just getting their refunds when they complete their tax returns, but rather they are gaining access to these fundamental and really pivotal benefit programs, such as the earned income tax credit, such as the child tax credit. So most notably, something that I can really tie concretely to a recent turn of events was last year. For anyone who has children on this call, but I have children, so I can tell you, there was a substantial change to the rules around a benefit called the child tax increase, or the child tax credit last year. And in last year's iteration of the child tax credit, what that meant was children under a certain age, or I should say taxpayers with children under a certain age, automatically, as long as their income met the thresholds, were automatically eligible for $3,600 in a credit or a benefit that was refundable, i.e. it could be paid directly to the taxpayer. And that other children could qualify up to $3,000. So particularly during the pandemic, this sort of change was really instrumental to be able to provide resources, financial resources, dollars to families that really needed it. And that's just one example of one of the things that through free tax prep, low and moderate income taxpayers can actually then engage in our services, and through that engagement are then able to gain access to these credits. The other big tax credit that we always talk about is the earned income tax credit. And this is really a tax credit that benefits working families. And in most recently, there was actually I believe it was a New York Times article that came out this past summer, but it was featured on NPR. It was a long-term study, about a 30-year study since the implementation of things like the earned income tax credit and its impact on poverty, specifically childhood poverty. And it showed that there has literally been a significant drop, millions of children who are now out of poverty because of the implementation and the use of credits like the child tax credit, like the earned income tax credit, that are greatly benefiting working families and families with children. And a big reason why this is so important is because through VITA, we can help ensure that these families are getting connected to these credits. So this is one of the big things about being a volunteer with United Way and providing free tax prep services is it's not just simply about doing taxes, is that we're literally giving hundreds and in some cases thousands of dollars to families to literally keep them housed, to keep lights on in their home, to keep food in their refrigerator, to give their kids clothing so that they can go to school. So these credits that we are working with through free tax prep are really essential to many working families and low to moderate income families. So you can see some of the statistics on here about the impacts that they have had, but even this isn't the most accurate or most up-to-date version of how many children have been lifted out of poverty because of work, because of child tax credits, because of earned income tax credits that are helped to be connected to through VITA services, that we're connecting VITA services through that. So VITA, though, or free tax prep with the United Way can't be done alone. We can't do this in isolation. Again, Shayla McGill, the free tax prep associate, and I are the two primary support units here at the United Way. So the United Way really relies 100% and heavily on its partners. You can see a number of the different partners that are here on this particular slide, but we work with more partners than are actually captured on this slide. We work with basically two sets of groups. We have host sites, places where people are actually going to. So a good example of that is like the Cincinnati Public Library. We don't have staff at the Cincinnati Public Library, but rather our volunteers are spread out throughout different branches of the Cincinnati Public Library to be able to help provide free tax prep services. Another one of the things that we do here is have partners who are providing deeper level of services. And some of the partners that I can point to on this slide are places like the Center for Great Neighborhoods or Brighton Center, where their tax services are part and parcel of programs that are actually at those organizations. Center for Great Neighborhoods is a perfect example of one of our core partners, because not only do they do tax services, but they're actually one of our key resources, being a low-income taxpayer clinic where our taxpayers from other sites could even go and visit if they had some sort of protracted or serious tax problem with which they need representation to work with and through the IRS. So we have a lot of partners, and these partners are absolutely essential for us to be able to deliver effective services on a year-to-year basis. So we really need these partners. We really need volunteers to be able to facilitate all of this work. And as you can see from the volunteers here, we're not located simply just in Hamilton or simply in the city of Cincinnati here, but rather that our footprint with free tax prep is very large. We are doing a lot of work specifically in Hamilton County, but when it comes to the United Way of Greater Cincinnati's footprint, we're in Brown, we're in Claremont, Northern Kentucky, we're in Boone, Campbell, Grant, and Kenton counties, and in Indiana, both Dearborn and Ohio counties. So these areas and residents of these areas are all eligible to come to our free tax prep sites, whether it's in Claremont, Hamilton. But in addition to the places that are part of the United Way of Greater Cincinnati's footprint, we also have some sites operating in other spaces, including in Gallatin and Pendleton counties in Northern Kentucky, as well as Butler County in Ohio. So we have about 30 to 40 locations and partners that operate in an annual basis. Again, all really throughout that tax season of January through March in a given year. So we really rely on these partners, these hosts, the volunteers to be able to deliver these services to individuals and families that really could benefit from connecting and having their taxes prepared. Now, I think that most importantly, what a lot of people always want to see is, well, what are your actual results? Like, what sort of impact and what sort of footprint are you leaving when it comes to your work? And ours is pretty substantial. We have one of the larger, we have a larger coalition and collaboration of partners. And you can see, we don't have 2022's numbers up here, but I know them pretty well already. But year over year, we're averaging anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 returns that are completed by our teams. 7,000 to 8,000 returns in a matter of approximately 10 to 12 weeks of worth of work. So that's pretty substantial. In 10 to 12 weeks to do about 7,000 returns. And what is that generating? That's generating about anywhere from 11 to sometimes upwards to $14 million in refunds to families who truly need these dollars, as I had already made the case for. In addition to that, you can see the sort of impact this work has on direct benefits. And you can see each year we're looking at anywhere between $2 to $4 million in earned income tax credits that we recoup, anywhere from 1 to 2 million in child tax credits that we recoup for families who are really in need of these key dollars. In 2022, we performed slightly better than we did in 2021. The past couple of years of COVID have definitely posed some unique and interesting challenges for us, but we've once again exceeded the 7,000 return limit and gotten closer to the 12 million in refund mark for this past tax year. There was a little bit of an anomaly when it comes to CTC dollars because we were much higher this year, but that's because of the exceptional rule for the 2021 tax year, all regarding the expansion of the dollars for that year. But again, very pivotal year, very important that we got those dollars out to individuals. So you can see there is a huge impact by the work that you can deliver as a volunteer with United Way's free tax prep program. You can literally get millions of dollars back into our community through your work. And we need you to be able to help facilitate this work. And what I would also add to this statistic that is not on that page is the one thing that I always like to think about is, again, when we're thinking about low to moderate income families, most of the time, if they don't have access to a VITA program, to a free tax prep program like ours, then the question is, where are they going to have their taxes done? They're either preparing themselves and taking risks of making errors, which the IRS would not necessarily correct, especially if they're short on benefits. So that's one alternative if they're not connecting to a VITA program. Alternatively is that they have to go to a paid preparer. The national average for a paid preparer is $320+. Now, in our own region, it's around $270. But again, think about that. That's $270 that is going to be extrapolated from the overall refund. So on average, on a given year with 7,000 returns that we are doing, we're saving anywhere from $3 to $5 million just in fees for families. Fees that, again, imagine what $200 a month or $300 a month could do for a low-income family. It can keep lights on. It could pay half of the rent. It could be the difference between getting to work for someone for a month or longer or not getting to work for that month. So again, these are really important dollars, not just the refund dollars, but the money that we're saving through the work that we do, in addition to the benefits that we're getting for a lot of working families. So hopefully at this time, you're really considering, okay, I'm interested, tell me what it is, you know, what are we talking about when we talk about free tax prep? Like, what sort of skills do I need to do? What sort of skill base do I need to have? And, you know, what am I going to be doing? So let me kind of unpack some of that a little bit here now. So first of all, whether you're doing greeting and intake or tax preparation, or even something a little bit more challenging than that, like if you're going to go and delve really into the site coordination type work, you don't need to be a CPA. Being a CPA would certainly put you at an advantage, but I do tax work every single year. Shayla does tax work every single year. We are not CPAs. We do not come from accounting backgrounds. I come from the furthest thing from an accounting background, being from the liberal arts area. So we, though, at the United Way provide everything that you're going to need to be able to be a tax preparer, plus the IRS limits our work scope of what it is that we can do. So I'll talk about that. But what sort of skills can you bring to the table that would put you in advantage to being an excellent volunteer? Well, number one, obviously, you're going to be working directly with a lot of people. So if you are comfortable working with a diverse set of individuals, if you're personable and friendly, obviously that's going to put you at a distinct advantage to being able to be an excellent volunteer with the Free Tax Prep Initiative. With taxes, this isn't the same as other volunteer opportunities. So there's a lot of depth into both the training as well as kind of like what it is that you're doing. So there does have to be a few things that are probably outside of maybe another kind of like volunteer opportunity. One, we work with people's personal information. So obviously you want to have a high level of ethical integrity. Every volunteer has to go through a standards of conduct exam, basic principles of we're not taking people's information. We're not trying to sell individuals on, any sort of work that we do on the side. So really we're focused on providing tax preparation for individuals while we do this work. Also, for those of you who are interested in doing tax preparation, there's a lot of questions that we do have to ask, particularly like think about when you do a tax return, if you've done one for yourself. I have kids. So if, say, for instance, my partner and I were separated, you might have to ask a couple questions about where did the children live in the past year? Those determine things like dependency, which then has significant ramifications on filing status as well as any sort of additional benefits for the year. So you do have to have this willingness not only to work with individuals and do so in a friendly and personable manner, but also to be willing to be able to ask some questions to be able to get to the right answers, because we want to make sure that when we're doing tax preparation, we're doing it as flawlessly as possible and doing it in a way that is transparent and just making sure that the taxpayers know what it is that we're doing with their information. I would also add that tax returns have come a long way over the course of time. We primarily use, and when I say primarily, we only really use online software to file returns. It's very rare that we would ever do a paper return. And most of the time, even when we're talking about paper returns, it's mainly due to issues that we may occur in the filing, that we may find in the filing process that results in us needing to actually file a paper return. So we're always looking for individuals who want to obviously learn new skills with taxes. Like I said, Shayla and I both, don't come from accounting or financial background. So we had to learn a lot about actual tax law. As well as a willingness to engage in sort of online systems and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn, a lot of opportunity to kind of develop new skill sets or hone skill sets that you want to. Even people coming from certain financial backgrounds may have less experience with individual tax returns. Citing I'm going to move to the next slide, but citing some of my current partners, we have a number of corporate partners that help us out on an annual basis. And many of them are actually, doing taxes for corporations and businesses. And so are not necessarily familiar with individual tax laws. So it's kind of almost a retraining and a kind of continuing to hone their skill set as well. So what are we looking for when it comes to volunteers? Well, we're looking for pretty much 2 to 4 different types of volunteer sets. We're really looking first and foremost for individuals who are willing to function as greeters and screeners. And I'll go into this in a little bit more depth here shortly, but basically a greeter or screener is not only just introducing a person to a site when they visit, saying hello, getting them checked in, if it's an appointment-based site, but they're also gonna, as a screener, do a lot of work to double check that individuals, when they come in to have their taxes prepared that day, have all the necessary documents. And that's, again, another thing with taxes. You're going to need some things when you come in. This is, again, one of those things where you need to bring in your W-2s. You need to bring in identification. You need to bring in a partner's identification if you're doing something, say, like married filing jointly. So there's a lot of things that do need to be accounted for before actually engaging in that preparation work. And that is really one of the main objectives of both greeters and screeners. You don't need to know tax law to be a greeter or screener. However, it's very advantageous to know a degree of tax law to really understand the full role as a greeter and a screener. But there are many sites across the collaborative that are needing greeters and screeners. Those who are going through, we have a checklist that people have to go through. So you're checking off that they brought everything in, they filled in the checklist as completely as possible before then moving that taxpayer, that family to a preparer to do the work of preparation. The other big role is obviously preparation along with quality review. It's very interesting. There are a lot of licensed tax preparers out there, CPAs, enrolled agents, but then there's no real rule by the IRS that you have to have your tax return prepared by someone with a licensure. And I think the most recent statistic is that about 50% of individuals have their taxes returned by individuals without licensures, without credentials, without really anything. That's not VITA though. VITA, we all have to be, I guess certified is really the best word to say. I wouldn't say licensed, but we all have to be certified. So when it comes to preparation, we know that tax preparers that come through programs like United Way's Free Tax Prep as a VITA partner with the IRS and the Department of Treasury, that you're being trained and you are certified and you know about tax law. So it actually puts you ahead of a lot of other individuals that are out there in the public doing tax returns that may not ever have a license behind them. So one of the biggest roles that we always need to fill are those tax preparers, those who would be willing to do tax returns. And again, I think that sometimes taxes can really be a scary or intimidating proposal for individuals, especially without the background. But like I said, one, we provide all the training that is going to be necessary to be able to be successful as a preparer. In addition, that we are protected through liability and statements that protect us. As long as we are following the rules, even if we make mistakes, we are not going to be held liable for those mistakes as long as they were not done, knowingly with intention. And like I would also say, besides just offering all of the training and protection, the IRS by its very nature limits the scope of what we can do. So we can't do complicated tax returns with, like, for instance, I'll give you a good rule right now. Cryptocurrency is like off the books. It was last year and it's this year. So someone comes in with cryptocurrency exchanges, we can't actually do a return of that nature. So it's something that the IRS has specifically said, if you're a volunteer, we know that you will be skilled if you're certified, but we don't want you doing this type of work, such as cryptocurrency, such as businesses with substantial income loss or businesses with employees, thinking about Schedule C. So in reality, the IRS does a really good job of saying, not only we're going to train you and get you ready to do this, but we're not going to ask you to do everything. We're going to keep your scope nice and tight, and that you're going to do services as a preparer and as a quality reviewer, all under this one particular category of taxes that doesn't require as extensive experience to be able to facilitate the work. Quality reviewers are basically the same as preparers. However, the key difference with a quality reviewer is, in our work, we have to have two sets of eyes check every return. So if I'm doing a return and Shayla is right next to me, she has to review it to make sure that I don't make any mistakes. This is what makes our program somewhat unique and why we have such a high success rate on the national level. VITA returns are completed with a 98% accuracy rate. So again, think about it, that through the checks, through the training, through the limiting of scope, this national program has one of the highest success rates in actually getting returns prepared and submitted to the IRS successfully, thus eliminating a lot of the things that we hear about the IRS in recent years, like people, if there's an error, then people have to wait on the phone for literally hours, or maybe even have to call back days or months later to get the matter adjudicated. With our success rate, there's a high probability that most of our taxpayers are never going to have to navigate those systems for the IRS, which they're working on right now with the hiring of new individuals and new funding streams. But we don't want to even have to have our taxpayers go through that. So, and there's other roles as well, and those are all described. So we could always use individuals who act as coaches for something called an FSA model. That's basically DIY with just a coach. And then site coordinators, that really takes some time to get into. We're always interested in talking with individuals who would like to do site coordination, but it's always good that for those who are interested in site coordination to possibly join up with an active site and start working directly with a current site coordinator for at least one season before breaking off and then starting your own site, because we are interested in always expanding our footprint when we can and when it's appropriate. So what do things look like here as we're starting to talk about your commitment and what we need to be aware of? Well, first of all, the IRS doesn't really do a lot of its, a lot of the training is out there right now. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we don't really begin our training until December and really run in the beginning of the year. Why? It's because there's always a possibility for tax law to change all the way up to the end of the calendar year. So we want to be cautious about doing too much training in the beginning and then having to maybe change something. 2 years ago, it actually changed in the middle of tax season. That's a rarity. I think that was one of the first times historically it's ever happened, but that does occur. So we want to be very cautious about doing too much training too early, knowing that there's always possibility for change. This year, we know that the tax season is going to operate January the 23rd through April the 17th. And when we're talking about volunteers, you really can get the most bang out of this experience by really making sure that you make a full commitment. We have a number of sites that only operate for, like, say, a month in February, or maybe a month in March. There's a couple corporate teams that do that. So usually when you're talking about a month, it could be that you're talking about a couple weeknights or a couple Saturdays. It really all depends on the site at which you're volunteering. But we're usually looking from anywhere about 12 hours of volunteering to really get the most out of it. Training can last anywhere from, depending on how much you want to self-invest in it. Our trainings total out to about 8 hours, and then plus the volunteer commitment, you're looking at about a 20 to 25 hour commitment. But you can always supplement with more training, expanding the training time from 8 to anywhere to 8 to 16 hours. And then I have volunteers that once they get into this and find out how easy it is and get to see the impact that they have with families and see the refunds and the look on people's faces, knowing how these dollars can really change something for them. I have volunteers that volunteer at 3 different sites per week. It's not unusual that the average volunteer hours in the tax season total over 30 to 40 hours just in the tax season alone. It's not uncommon at all. So, but we are looking for individuals to participate January through April. We're looking for people to pick up a couple shifts. Through part of this, I'll tell you a little bit more about the sites that may be asking for more volunteers with intentionality, but there will be a listing of all the volunteer sites. But training doesn't really get fired up here for another month. So you still have time and you can spread the word about this opportunity with a lot of individuals. Now, I do want to say again, assuring quality, I've already mentioned about that we have a strict code of ethics. Again, through the work that we do, not only are you trained, but all sites usually pair new volunteers with experienced volunteers in their first couple go rounds, just to make sure that they're feeling comfortable with the work that we're doing. And as again, you're protected from a liability, and this is all part of the training materials. But again, as long as you're following the rules and you're not doing anything intentionally wrong, there is no liability if we make a mistake. As a matter of fact, it's not uncommon to make mistakes. That's why we have a quality review process. That's why we have site coordinators who sometimes double and triple check work to make sure that what we're doing is accurate. So really, there's no real risk to you as a volunteer to come in and say, well, what if I make a mistake? Well, sometimes those things happen. And here's the great part too. We can always amend returns. Remember, amending a return is a possibility, and it's not that uncommon either. Most of the time, those amended returns are due to things that we're unaware of, that the taxpayers have failed to communicate to us as preparers, and we end up amending returns. But occasionally there may be an instance in which we may need to do an amended return due to a preparer error. But that occurs all the time, in the sense that, we don't want it to be a frequency thing, but it can happen and you're not going to be liable. I would also add, for those of you on the call who happen to be professionals, there is an opportunity that if you are certified, and you're certified at a tax law called Advanced, which you'll learn more about in the actual trainings, is that you can actually get CE credits as well. So this is a possibility. It requires just a touch, a little extra paperwork, but it's not that big of a deal. Most of the time we get about 50, we have about 350 volunteers on an annual basis. And I'd say I get about 50 to 60 who request CE credits annually. So it is something that can be easily facilitated, and make sure that we connect you to those resources for those of you who could benefit through getting CE credits. I'm a little bit, I want to make sure I carve out enough time for questions. So I might have to kind of hop through some of these next slides a little bit faster. This really kind of shows you some of our iterations of service models. And again, when we get to the point where we've identified all of our sites, which we know a vast majority right now, but each site will operate slightly differently. And it may be your preference to be at a certain site that's delivering a certain model. It may be that your preference is being in a certain neighborhood, or it may be that your preference is being at a certain day and time of the week, or it might be a combination of all those things. So like I said, we have some sites that are Saturdays, some sites that are weekdays, some sites that are appointment only, some sites that are walk-in. And along with all those different iterations from being in the community, there's also different ways in which sites operate. On the very far end to the left, if you're looking at this, most people think about our traditional sites as being in person, same day. So giving you an example of this one of our corporate partners, Tony, runs a site out of the Reading Branch Library. In this model, Tony does everything by appointment. It takes about 50 taxpayers every Saturday by appointment. And what happens is that at that sort of site, taxpayer will come in, meet with a greeter, screener, who will do their intake and their checklist, making sure they have all their tax documents. The taxpayer will then move over to a preparer who will work with the taxpayer and prepare that return right then and there, either with the taxpayer sitting across, or maybe the taxpayer is walking around the library, but the taxpayer is there on site. And then a quality reviewer checks the return, checks that preparer's work, and then the taxpayer returns, meets with either the quality reviewer or the preparer, and then kind of does a quick review. We get an official signature authorizing us to be able to do an e-file, and then we send it off right then and there to the IRS through our online tax preparation software, and business is done. Obviously with some exceptions to that, but that's what a traditional model looks like. What many sites will also use is this kind of two down is this virtual or hybrid drop-off model. Shayla McGill, the tax prep associate in the call, and I actually help manage a site in Harrison, Ohio, the Harrison Branch Library. We use this model. It's similar. Taxpayers come in for appointments. We don't do walk-ins there, and they will meet with a small group of intake and screeners who will, again, go through the entire checklist of all the tax documents that they're going to need. But then those documents are then scanned into a secured system. They're returned to the taxpayer, and the taxpayer leaves. A team of preparers then work with the taxpayer through remote means, through tools like Get Your Refund, an online system where we can actually text, email, and work with taxpayers and prepare their return all in a virtual or remote space at a distance from them. And then through that same system, we can review the return and get an e-signature and then file the return all at a distance. So the taxpayer really doesn't have to stay for an extended period of time on those Saturdays for those appointments. It's a quick in and out with the document scanned, and then all the work is facilitated remotely through the course of a week. So this is the hybrid drop-off model. And then we have a couple other models as well. The virtual only is a little bit limited. We really only operate that directly out of the United Ways site. So that's where everything is done virtually. It's not a real good fit for some individuals because it's incumbent on the taxpayer to scan all their own documents and put them into a secure portal. Again, Get Your Refund. So we do work with individuals on that front, but we actually encourage that if volunteers prefer to do things that are remote, that we can still connect you to our many remote sites. Harrison Branch Library operates remotely. The Community Action Agency has operated remotely. There's a number of others that operate remotely. So to a certain extent, you don't even really need to leave the convenience of your home to be able to do some of this. But if you want to work directly with individuals, you can do this through our in-person service. And as we kind of wrap up a little bit with the service and making sure that I give some time for questions and feedback. So what are our concrete steps? What are your concrete steps to take next in this pathway, in this work to ensure that you can become a volunteer? Well, first, if you haven't visited the United Ways website, I encourage you to do so. You can go to this link right here to be able to, and this will be shared in the PowerPoint when it gets shared out after this meeting. And I encourage you to click on this link and get signed up. Why? By clicking on this link, you're then joined to our email lists. Those email lists will contain further information about upcoming trainings in December as well as January for actual tax law training and intake training. It will also connect you with all of the listing of sites that we know there will be volunteer opportunities. I can tell you right now, a couple sites off the top of my head. We need some volunteers at Elder High School on the west side in Price Hill. We need some volunteers in Claremont County for the Claremont County Library Branch. We need some volunteers in Millvale at the Recreation Center in Millvale. We also need some volunteers over at the Ohio Means Job Center, located off of Central Parkway, located near Central and Liberty. But there's more sites than that. Those are just a couple I'm reciting off the top of my head. But you'll get that sort of information and other key resources by joining our mailing list. So that's one thing that you can do. The next thing that you can do today, right now, if you want to, as soon as we're done with this, is that you can get on our Eventbrite page and start scheduling your next level of training, which is called Part A, Training for New Beginners. We start to touch on tax law in this training, but really that training is to get you familiar with all the key resources from the IRS, all the key resources from Lincoln Learn, to be able to understand the tools that we'll be using and the systems we'll be navigating to be able to do this work through free tax prep. After that, then I would encourage you to start studying. Most of the training resources are actually up, but more self-study modules will be forthcoming here in the upcoming weeks. You'll be able to connect to those through things like Mobilize, which you can join up through being on the email list, as well as through, you should be able to do some training directly from IRS Lincoln Learn. The certification portal will not officially be updated probably until, I'd say, like maybe the end of next week or the week thereafter. But the certification should be opening up here very soon. So after you've done a little training, either independently or through our trainings, the next step is then to obviously get certified, complete your trainings, and then schedule time, find a site that works for you, and then join us as a free tax prep volunteer and really help families work towards that economic well-being that they deserve and get these hundreds and thousands of tax dollars and credits back into their hands. So with that, it leads me to the end of our session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, as well as stop the share, and invite us all to have a discussion or ask any questions at that juncture. So give me a moment while everything gets turned off here. And